welcome to Money Matters, reporting from the Philippines, where we're covering the 2022 presidential elections. We take a look at what the next president will have to contend with once he or she wins the elections.
Sanib puwersa na po ang ating mga kababayan sa likod ng unity team, sa likod ng adhikain ng pagkakaisa.
He bankrupted the country. Our country was bankrupt because after 1986, even the central bank went bankrupt. The central bank was in the hock in 1984 to the tune of $600 million. The United States had found out we had been kiting money, $600 million, because we were short of funds already. You see, Ferdinand Marcos, he put all his cronies in place, and he protected them, and he also gave them tax breaks. But by 1980, most of these cronies had gone belly up. The projects weren't good in the first place, and so they couldn't pay the loans. Now, the loans were foreign loans.
Ferdinand Marcos was president of the Philippines from 1965 until his ouster in 1986. His son, Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos, is currently the frontrunner by a margin of roughly 20% in the presidential elections set to take place in a week.
There is caution because of the history attached of cronyism and corruption. That's their suspicion. That's not a certainty, and we certainly hope it doesn't come back.
With the Philippines still in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, the country's debt went from 6 trillion pesos, or $115 billion in 2016, to 12 trillion pesos, or $230 billion 2 months ago.
We have to service those debts. You need income to service those debts. And we are not going to get that income from what we are doing right now. The new president is going to have to enforce a lot of painful things, Okay? Yeah. It has to, he has to increase the revenues income or the revenue source, but at the same time, he's also got to learn to control, unnecessary, waste or corruption or something. So it's going to be painful, but with the majority support, it will be easier for him to implement these policies, I think. I guess a new administration has to focus on new revenue streams.
Leni Robredo, a lawyer, former congresswoman, and current vice president, is in second place in the polls.
Surveys of the financial sector and maybe some executives that show that she's favored by them for various reasons. I think that's because they perceive her to be, probably in contrast to the current administration, more business-friendly in the sense that her policies would keep and attract investment, maybe not scare investment away. So I think there's a lot of support for her within the business community.
Job creation is a top priority for the country as the pandemic starts to ease, and some groups are hoping it creates a larger middle class.
The Filipino-Chinese community, we are a very small minority. One concern for entrepreneurs throughout the decades is the unequal, the rich-poor gap for decades. It's bad for business. Businessmen dream that the Philippines would have a big, well-off middle class.
Wilson Flores of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce says the next president must have a strong mandate to make major socio-economic reforms. He says if Bong Bong becomes the next president with a large majority, he should be able to do this.
Many of his voters are from the poorer sectors of the whole country. So he owes them. He owes them that this is his chance to uplift their socio-economic conditions and not continue with the past policies that will always, the rich-poor gap is still. So those are the positive things, hopefully.
Ronald Mendoza, Dean of the Ateneo School of Governance, says job creation has to go hand in hand with inclusiveness to lift people out of poverty.
The deep and basic reforms on ease of doing business, promoting competitiveness, good governance at the local level that you will not get if you don't liberalize the political system from the political class. Our billionaires are even wealthier under the pandemic than than in the previous years. I believe it was a 30% increase in their net wealth. The pandemic has an unequalizing impact on populations. The ones who are not connected, the ones who are not able to thrive in work from home, the ones whose children are not able to interconnect with good electronic and other internet services, they will be further left behind.
Attorney Vic Rodriguez, Bong Bong Marcos' spokesman, says jobs are a priority for them.
Just like the rest of the world, when the pandemic struck, we were hit severely by unemployment and underemployment. So one of his core platform will be jobs, 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 not only job creation, but jobs preservation.
To create jobs and further boost the economy, analysts say the government will also have to focus on two other issues.
The liberalization legislation, really an investment in infrastructure and in the education of Filipinos. Those are the two things that really bring in investment. Aside from that, the usual laundry list of ease of doing business, less red tape and less corruption, and more stability of contracts and laws.
The business community all agree that foreign investments are needed to help the economy. President Duterte's administration liberalized laws, which opened the country up to more foreign direct investments by allowing businesses in certain sectors to be wholly owned by foreign companies.
We need foreign investors. There's no question. And you're not going to get foreign investors in if their perception is that, the rules that apply today will not apply 6 years from now or 3 years from now. So that's the first thing we have to do is find a way to, I guess, again, change their perception that, we tend to change our policy depending on which administration sitting down. We have to have a fixed policy for attracting, foreign investors.
Wilson Flores says whether Marcos or Robredo become the next president, ties with China will improve.
A possible Bong Bong Marcos presidency would, people expect, would continue stability of Philippine-China economic partnership. And not only continue, maybe even strengthen it. Because Bong Bong Marcos' father was the one who pioneered diplomatic relations between two countries. And hopefully that will matter. Hopefully China will give more support economically to the Philippines.
As for Leni Robredo,
she said when she becomes president, her first foreign trip would be to China. She is not anti-China. She is for Philippine sovereignty and all the issues that should be protected. She knows that the largest economy next to the US is China. And the next economic superpower in the world is China. Many people forget that Leni Robredo's husband is ethnic Chinese. When Leni Robredo won as vice president, that was 6 years ago, that small ancestral village of Jesse Robredo's ancestors in Fujian province, they had a big celebration.
Bob Herrera Lim says if Marcos becomes president, a careful hand will be needed to balance Philippine sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea with trade and investment to China.
China is still the emerging economic and political power in the region. And therefore, if you do not trade with China, if you do not work with China, you suffer consequences, right? But at the same time, he recognizes that the Philippines has historical relationships. The military of the Philippines has a long history with the US military. Philippine educational institutions have a longer history with Western educational institutions. Marcos will weigh all of this and say, okay, I have to stay on good ties with China because it buys a lot of products, it can be a source of investment, but at the same time, he recognizes we have historical ties to the United States and many of the countries in Southeast Asia.
Wilson points out that the Philippines' relationship with China lags behind other ASEAN countries.
We are the weakest economically in China. Example, Thailand, every year they have 11 million China tourists every year to Thailand. We have only 1 or 2 million tourists a year. The business people I talk to, they hope more infrastructure, more IT, more tourism, more high-end tourism, investments, and even education. Philippines is a mining power, superpower. So whoever will be the next president, whether it's Bong Bong Marcos, Leni Robredo, Lacson, or anyone, hopefully will leverage that mining advantage of the Philippines and sell more to China at a better price, and hopefully not only sell raw material, hopefully entice China manufacturers to come to the Philippines and process them and sell higher value products to China.
With the economy struggling out of the pandemic and geopolitical tensions high around the world, the next president will have to navigate carefully. Next week, part 2 of the special election coverage.
Coming up on Money Matters, the economic impact of a business exodus. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Matters on assignment in the Philippines. Back in Hong Kong, since the COVID restrictions, there are 270 fewer international companies since 2019. Where have they all gone? Zella Chin reports on the economic impact this could have on the territory.
Ray-Phil Wong was born in Hong Kong and raised in San Francisco. After working in Silicon Valley for a few years, he relocated to Hong Kong in 2010.
I wanted to see the business growth and opportunities of Asia itself. And Hong Kong was such an easy city to live and travel all around the different markets and industries.
The serial entrepreneur wanted to try his luck in Hong Kong's growing startup scene.
During that time, people were so hungry to want to learn about tech. Hong Kong is so different is because it's a city that never sleeps. So it's possible to take 3 meetings easily after 6 o'clock. Asian Food Nerd is a content brand, and we cover videos, reviews in Hong Kong. And our next series, we're going to cover the power behind food brands.
Ray-Phil started his latest venture in August 2021. He and his team create short videos about food. He plans to move his company out of Hong Kong this summer because he's had difficulties running his business in the SAR. First, he had trouble with hiring because the talent pool has shrunk.
One of the major benefits of Hong Kong is that it attracted so many expats with world international experience. They were part of my core talent pool in Hong Kong, and now a lot has left. I have to retain them, but allow them to work remotely worldwide.
He has people working from Europe, UK, Turkey, and the Philippines. The COVID travel restrictions add extra cost to his business.
One of the greatest things about Hong Kong is the ability to come into the airport fast, land, and do business. But because of the restrictions, that has slowed everything down. And that is also hurting the wallet because of the hotel fees, but also time, which is very, very important in terms of building any startup.
During the pandemic, Hong Kong imposed 1 to 3 week quarantines for residents arriving from overseas to decrease the risk of COVID infections.
Ray-Phil, are you definitely moving your business away from Hong Kong?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to move back to the States because I actually haven't seen my family for over 2 years. But also, it's great to be the heart in LA where media is and also a lot of ad partners. Very excited about that.
Yeah, we walk very slowly.
Davide De Rosa is the vice chair for the European Chamber of Commerce. Recently, Eurocham surveyed its members on the impact of COVID-19 on the business community. It found that nearly 50% of the companies had plans to relocate some or all of their business operations out of the city in the next 12 months.
Hong Kong is still pretty much closed to the rest of the world, and everyone believes that the quarantine measures is too long, it's too difficult to go in and out. So the fact that there was no clarity as to when this restriction will be lifted or when Hong Kong effectively would reopen to the world then the company, in the meantime, cannot wait for too long. They need to plan. Another very important factor is that the reopening is also unclear with mainland China. And there's a lot of companies who have quite large size operation in China.
Arrivals to the mainland need to undergo 14 days of quarantine. Vaccinated travelers arriving in Hong Kong from the mainland have to quarantine for 7 days.
While some companies are making plans to leave Hong Kong, others are gone already. In the first 2 years of the pandemic, there's been a decrease of 270 international companies. That's a drop of about 4%. One economist says that would impact Hong Kong's economic growth in the long run.
That will obviously affect the number of direct investment into Hong Kong, and also the jobs that would be available for Hong Kongers and expats, and also there would be less economic transactions in general. That could actually have a long-term impact in terms of cutting each year's GDP growth.
Some European firms have been scaling down operations and investments in the city.
There are staff or functions have been relocated overseas, like for example, like at senior level, in order to allow people to be able to travel. Right? For example, if some people decide to relocate certain functions in Singapore, at least they know that Singapore you can go in and out.
Starting in April, vaccinated travelers can enter Singapore without having to quarantine. FedEx, Mandarin Oriental, Bank of America, and JP Morgan have plans to relocate some of their staff away from Hong Kong. And according to the Eurocham survey, more than 50% of the respondents reported unusually high staff turnover.
There was like a reduction of staff because the staff decided to perhaps leave for personal reason, for family reason.
In the first 2 years of the pandemic, Hong Kong's population decreased by about 117,000 residents, or 1.6%. And more than 131,000 residents left the city in February and March this year. Tommy says that could cause a potential 2% decline in GDP.
There have been a pretty significant size of outflows of Hong Kong residents. So that would have an impact on the labor supply or the supply of talents, people that are available for work in Hong Kong. If these people left permanently, then that would definitely have a long-term economic impact.
Hong Kong follows a dynamic zero-COVID policy, meaning that the government tries to minimize COVID cases through border controls, quarantines, business and school closures. Tommy thinks that if Hong Kong's COVID policies don't change, then it could affect the city's reputation as an international financial center.
The fact that much of the rest of the world is reopening at the moment, whereas Hong Kong right now is pretty much sticking to the dynamic zero-COVID policy, that is indeed a sharp contrast to the rest of the world. And so that's why from an international business perspective, this may not be a favorable thing for them to stay in Hong Kong.
As Tommy says, the heart of the matter is following China's zero-COVID policies.
Well, why don't we... during Christmas, New Year's, all the big events, the streets packed with people.
That's a long time ago, it seems.
A long time ago. Seems like another lifetime, but this COVID virus has not helped.
Alan Zeman is known as the father of Long Kwai Fong. The bar and restaurant district has been hit hard by the COVID restrictions of limited dining hours and bar closures.
It went from a buzzy place to a ghost town, basically. It used to break my heart walking through the area. My main business is being a landlord in Lang Kwai Fong. It's been a very, very difficult time for bars. They've been closed down for since January, and couldn't even open up at all. And so that's a long time to be closed for a business. And so many of my tenants just can't pay rent.
Long Kwai Fong is popular with the expatriate community, and many have left during the pandemic. Things could be looking up after social distancing measures were relaxed. On April 21st, dine-in hours were extended to 10 p.m. In the next phase, dine-in hours will be extended to midnight and bars can reopen if infections remain manageable. If all goes according to plan, Alan expects the party district and Hong Kong to be on the road to economic recovery by the second half of the year.
I'm hoping maybe at the end of June, July, we will start to get some semblance of flights, international flights coming back.
That optimism is driven by the further easing of travel rules, such as allowing vaccinated non-residents to enter the SAR starting May 1st.
For any longer-term public health strategy, we will have to take into account both factors. That is maintaining Hong Kong's accessibility to the mainland and also ensuring her continued connectivity with the outside world.
Alan Zeman sees brighter days ahead for Hong Kong. He recalls a similar panic and recovery 25 years ago when Britain handed Hong Kong back to China.
I'm not concerned because in '97 the same thing happened. People went to Canada, Australia, UK, and then 2 years later, I saw it in Lang Kwai Fong, a lot of my customers that had left suddenly came back again. In the end, Hong Kong will still survive and do very, very well. Once we get past this virus and learn how to do medicine coming out, eventually we'll be able to hopefully control it or live with it like we do with the flu every year.
Now a taste of the newest technology, computerized chopsticks. The chopsticks can enhance the taste of food by using electrical stimulation. They have the potential of making mealtimes more enjoyable for people who have to eat bland food due to health concerns. The chopsticks are connected to a mini computer device strapped to the eater's wrist. A weak electric current moves sodium ions, the basis of salty taste in food, closer to the ends of the utensils. The chopsticks enable the tongue of the person eating to feel an enhanced taste in their food. Clinical tests have shown that people who follow a low-sodium diet found the device enhances the salty taste of low-sodium food by up to 1.5 times. The daily salt intake of Japanese adults is about 10 grams, double the amount the World Health Organization recommends. Researchers hope to boost the health of Japanese with a jolt of volts.
That's the show. Thanks for watching. Next week, part 2 of our special coverage of the Philippine elections. See you then. Good night.